as a lot of you already know, if you go to the next slide, thanks very much. The Race to Resilience is a campaign launched by the high-level climate champions, Najla Topping and Gonzalo Munoz, and it's in order to drive action by non-state actors to deliver a step change in global ambition for climate resilience. And it's putting people and nature first. It's a sibling race to the Race to Zero campaign, which is has been around for just over a year and has over, Race to Zero has over 4,500 organizations who have committed to halving global emissions by 2030. So next slide, please. So the overall campaign goal for Race to Resilience is that by 2030 to catalyze action by non-state actors to build the ambition of 4 billion people from groups and communities who are vulnerable to climate risk. So that's everything that we are doing. We're aiming towards that overall goal. So through carrying out activities such as those at in the bottom row here, we as a campaign team hope to enable partner initiatives to develop more ambitious pledges to increase the resilience of individuals, companies, countries and regions, cities and natural systems. And this will lead to members of those initiatives, such as companies, investors, NGOs, community groups, knowledge organizations, and so on. It will lead to them getting mobilized and to taking more action. So the theory of change that we have is that this will lead to outcomes for the urban, rural, and coastal communities to contribute to that overall 4 billion people goal. Next slide, please. So increased resilience, it is initiative specific and it's context specific, and the Race to Resilience campaign is not trying to define this is the one way that you have to specify how it's defined. And we're aware that each organization has and can have its own theory of change for climate resilience. But for context, here is the IPCC definition that we use within our work. And next slide, please. Thank you. So the campaign uses the gaps between exposure, pledges, and validated outcomes to assess the resilience gap. And so the exposure mentioned here, it comes from a global analysis that identified populations exposed to 4 key hazards. And these were heat stress, both acute and chronic, agricultural drought, urban water stress, and flooding, both riverine and coastal. So this analysis assessed both slow and rapid onset climate hazards integrated with socioeconomic data on a 5 by 5 kilometer level to identify, to quantify the exposure of populations of varying vulnerability to one or more climate hazards at a subnational scale globally. So we intend to make this available separately, and we include it here just to show that we want to use it as a reference point to understand what the gaps are by initiative type, by geography, by hazard. So the analysis that we've mentioned here, it's not a primary driver or anything, it's just something that we use as a comparison to see where we are. So we intend to engage with initiatives to identify the main drivers of a validation gap, and ultimately to work with initiatives to close close these gaps through projects, through initiative projects. And then we also are working to develop campaign level transformations and action where there's a sufficient level of interest for impact. So next slide, please. So this is the metrics framework. We have pledge, outcome, and input metrics, and these form a framework to provide multiple reporting options for initiatives. And as you can see here, at the pledge and at the outcome level, we have individuals, companies, countries, regions, cities, and natural systems as our kind of 5 key areas. We also have, as you'll see here, there's 3 additional metrics to the side. There's finance mobilized, knowledge created and adopted, and then also resilience attributes, which is the key thing that we are here to talk about today. And these are all, these 3 are all kind of recognized as key enablers of resilience. So initiatives only report on the metrics that are relevant to them. Not everyone will be working on all of these, but all the initiatives will be working on at least one out of the pledges and outcomes. But today what we really want to do is to talk more about the resilience attributes. So I'm going to hand over to Roxana now, who's going to talk a little bit more in detail about those.
Yeah, thank you, Anya. A resilient attribute we understand as a quality of or characteristic described as essential to resilient building, and why we are asking now for a narrative in terms of resilient attribute, because building resilient is context specific. So we first want to know how initiatives are approaching resilient building to incorporate measurable aspects of resilient building. So the initiatives are asked to take process-related resilient attributes relevant to their actions and provide a short, open response and as to how these are being achieved. Okay. We have a list of 7 resilient attributes. They were selected after a review of the scientific literature and discussion with the methodological advisory group that is part of the campaign. Albert is part of that group, Simon as well. And we think these attributes capture most of the aspect of building resilience for the initiatives, but there is always a room to discuss in this matter. But after a discussion and a process of learning, we think this can capture all the aspects. As you will see, there are and can be they are and can be linked with each other. So our first attribute is preparedness and planning. And we understand that as the ability to anticipate, prepare, and plan for change and uncertainty by shaping responses, strategic planning initiatives, and warning systems, and mitigation and prevention actions. Yeah. Then learning reflects people's capacity to generate, absorb, and process new information and knowledge about climate change adaptation options and ways to live with and manage uncertainty. And this includes personal and collective experiential learning. And this aspect is very key in terms of working with communities, because we understand that as the ability to learn from and internalize past experiences and failures and to modify actions in the face of changes in order to avoid, obviously, the repetition of past mistakes and exercise caution in future decisions. After that, we have agency, that refers to the ability of people individually and collectively to have free choice in responding to environmental and other changes. These include the ability of local actors and communities to proactively, dynamically, and flexibly configure themselves and modify actions and implement new ideas, approaches, and programs following a disturbance. And the lack of agency can be seen as a lack of freedom of self-determination and action. And this aspect is very important because finally communities, they are the ones that give the first response to disturbances. So agency is a key aspect in resilient building. After that, we have social, but not are all at the same level. Yeah, okay. Social collaboration, we understand that as the ability to organize and act collectively. This includes partnership initiatives and collaborative approaches that bring people together in a mutually beneficial relationship. Equity and inclusivity refers to a just and equitable distribution and access to resources and respect of equal basic right in decision making. This includes and integrates all affected actors and discourses in decision making processes. Yeah, In this case, there is a particular focus on incorporating variety and extension of actors available. Yeah, multi-actor, multi-sector, multi-level. So people and social identities. Then we have flexibility, diversity, and redundancy. They are presented together because they are linked. Flexibility reflects having opportunities for switching between coping and adaptation strategies, actions, and management structures based on, for example, new information of ongoing evaluation. And it captures the diversity, robustness, and redundancy of these alternative strategies, yeah, to ensure short and long-term adaptation and multiplicity of potential options. And finally, assets refers to the natural, financial, technological, and service resources that people have access to in time of need, individually owned or public goods. That are the attributes we are working on currently. So now, Paulina. Yeah.
Okay, so good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming today for the workshop. So I'm going to talk about now why to include the narrative on resilient building in the metrics. So the narrative of resilient buildings attribute in the metrics, what is about? The narrative complements the pledges that Anya already mentioned, and we want to complement the human counting, which show the human counting show the number of people more resilient, but including the narrative, we want including the narrative to including the attribute, we want to understand how initiatives are building resilience. So not only the outcomes or the pledges, but also the processes. So attributes will help us in that. Resilient attributes are cross-cutting outcomes together with finance and knowledge that was mentioned before too. And the attributes may have a special characteristic for individuals, companies, local governments, cities, and natural systems. So they are context specific, and the attributes will be different in each initiative. Also, attribute could be linked to specific inputs and outcomes. Attributes could be linked to specific inputs and outputs, and also to outcomes and impacts. Also, and this is very important, they can be considered as opportunity to improve resilience because it gives the initiative the opportunity to reflect in these attributes and to address them. This will also depend will depend in the initiatives, but the point here is that the attributes give the opportunity to learn for the initiative how to keep improving resilience. And the narratives will help us to conceptualize and design metrics from attributes that what we will do next year. And I just want to give one example of that is related to equity and inclusivity. So in the survey of the initiative, we have some question related to equity and inclusivity. For example, question through 3.5, where we ask the initiative, what are the communities that are vulnerable to climate change that they are addressing? And also which of the historical marginalized communities they are addresses with each initiative. Also, we have question number 3.7, which we want to know the focus on the manner of involvement of vulnerable, marginalized communities to avoid tokenism. So we really want to know if there is a symbolical or a real participation of these vulnerable populations. And then we also have related to equity and inclusivity, where we are talking here, we have question 3.8, which is whether the involvement is intentional or incidental. So here is one example how one of these attributes that Roxana mentioned, equity and inclusivity, can be and has been included in the survey. So back to you, Roxana.
So the idea today is to have breakout rooms where we will be talking about the same questions. Okay, in this stage we have conceptualized definitions of resilience attributes. We are asking for a narrative on how initiatives fulfill these attributes. But our next stage, we want to characterize key aspects of each attribute and design metrics around these key aspects. So this is our main one of our main objectives for the next year. And for that, today we would like to start to discuss and how are initiatives approaching resilient building in practice, and how to move from narrative to the measurement of resilient attributes. So knowing your own experiences and how you are working on the field, working with initiatives, and how maybe you are measuring, if you do so, resilience, we can progress on including these key aspects in order to advance in the development of the metrics for the next year. So yeah, Chuchi, if you want to explain the last, maybe I will stop sharing. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Roxana. I don't have anything major to share. I can just share my screens again to share the questions of the breakout room. This is how you can rename yourself with R2R in front of you. I think all of you have done that. Yeah, just sharing the questions here. The two key questions basically that we're going to discuss, and with this I shall just put you, and both the breakout rooms essentially will have the same questions being discussed. We're not splitting you into breakout rooms because of different content. It's essentially because of the number of people and the fact that we'd like to have richer conversations. So we will have moderators and facilitators in each of the breakout rooms who will introduce themselves, and we'll also have note takers who can also introduce themselves. And I shall with this open the breakout rooms. We were having some great discussions. I was part of one of the conversations and we're having some great discussions. But if we'd like to start, I know we're short on time, but if we'd like to start reporting from the two groups, and then we can have a closing session where we say our goodbyes and maybe continue these conversations at a later date through other mediums for sure. So if
okay, I'm the rapporteur for group one.
Great, thank you. So Daniela, if you could start.
Yeah, it was so short, but we had a great conversation. I'd say that from the beginning, I realized that there are already quite very interesting questions that should be asked about all these attributes. For example, on assets, there was an issue about availability versus access. Social collaboration, there's something about that collaboration being horizontal or vertical. On what else we had on learning, there was an issue about the existence or not of platforms, if these are free and shared to all sorts of members within initiatives. So I think that from the narratives that we'll probably get very interesting pointers as to how to go about all these different narratives. There was a question as well on whether these are a system or not, if all of them should be addressed at the same time or not. But there was a concern as well, big concern as to, are you really getting into measuring this, and is this not putting a lot of a burden on the different initiatives? I didn't have the time to address that within the group, but maybe I just want to say that that was one concern, and the other one was they felt, a few of the members of the initiatives felt that they lacked guidance and that maybe the definition was not enough. But what I'd like to say is that this is a collaborative process, actually. So what we're trying to find here is think together with initiatives, with the groups we have on metrics that we could design around the experience the initiatives have by April. So, you know, I wouldn't have concerns. We are here to learn from each other, and by April we'll start thinking about good questions, and that's how we're thinking about all this. So that's for group one. Anything, maybe if someone wants to add something, but group two.
Thanks, Daniela. If Anya,
Yeah, so if I can add something, it was a very interesting discussion also on how to see this attribute from a systemic point of view. So they are very related one to each other, and I think that is an important point also.
Thanks, Paulina. Anya, Roxana, if you could nominate someone or just
Yes,
speak about the
Sabrina.
Yes, so I can only add on what has been said before. So it's really interesting to see how the different initiatives go about the attributes, how they implement it, and how it's measurable. And I think my personal takeaway, maybe the others can contribute, is that it's really difficult to measure these attributes. It's most of the time very expensive to do so, very time consuming. And maybe this could be a challenge to find innovative ways to measure them and to operationalize them in the future. But yes.
Yeah, thank you, Sabrina. Yes, and maybe as a last message that I did before in the breakout group is that finally, yeah, we have now 7, but initially there were 33 plus attributes we were working on. So this is a small list, not the perfect one, but one that we can start to discuss. As Daniela said, this is a learning process for each other. We couldn't, we never thought to impose attributes or even definition itself. Just this is a starting point. We'll continue working on this next year, and for that we really need your inputs from the initiatives in order to have the narratives to start to work on. Yeah.
Thanks, Roxana. Just to add a little bit about what was said in the last 30 seconds in our group. Yeah, there was a lot of kind of interesting people picked out attributes that they clearly are working on already, like assets and inclusivity and equity. And I think the key thing, as you said already, is we're working on them together. We're very much, for any of the initiatives who are interested in discussing further any of the metrics, the key ones that we're looking at are the individuals, the number of individuals whose resilience is increased, and the number of hectares that has increased resilience. We obviously also, the how then is the attributes, so we'd love to hear your comments on that as well.
Yeah.
We're almost close to time, so I think I'll take Albert, if you can make it quick, because we have maybe a minute.
Yeah, I just want to ask, because it seems no one has discussed, how do we factor in time in the attributes? Because what we see as a resilience at one point in time might not be resilience over time, or might not be resilient at that point, maybe resilient over a longer time.
Well, yeah, maybe Paulina, you want to add another thing, but we see resilience as a process. Yeah, it's a continued process. So we can continue maybe eternally measuring, because there are, even it was mentioned in our group, for example, some people can be resilient for some hazards, but not to others. So there are so many aspects, and this to analyze that we cannot analyze resilience in one point itself. It's a process of continuing continue building resilience.
I think I will have to. I think I will have to intervene and cut short the conversation. Interesting as it is, I think you can connect offline for sure and continue this conversation. We haven't, I mean, resilience has as many definitions as we can imagine, and it's difficult to reach consensus on attributes for sure, but it's exciting to see that conversations have begun and exciting to see that the coalition could play a role in it. And thank you for being around, and thank you for staying for a few minutes on the top of the hour on a very busy day. So yeah, sorry, Paulina.
Will be great to have a picture of our group. So if the people can turn on the camera and we can take a picture.
Sure.
Oh, you take a picture? I forgot. Daniela, can you take a picture?
I took one. Let me take another just in case, because I missed the, yeah. Done.
Great, thank you. That's great.
I took a picture too, so we have a lot of pictures.
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right, bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you all.